But moving into what we're watching for Superman and Lois, I think this might be one of my favorite episodes of this season. I think it has to do with the way that the storylines are balanced. Everyone got to eat in a way that worked really well. I wasn't even mad at the teens. I was very excited for what the teens were up to.
This was one of the most beautiful marriages as far as all the storylines goes. Like you said, everything came together on the night. It would definitely, I agree, it was one of my favorite ones as well. They slowly raised the stakes throughout the episode and then pulled the trigger in those last couple of moments. And it was just what a watch it was. And I mean, like, we'll get into all of it, but like, this wasn't really a Lois episode, but in many ways it was a Lois episode in that Bitsy Tulloch was not in it that much, but when she was on screen, you felt everything Lois was going through and you understood where she was coming from. But at the same time, this was very much about a Lois reaction resulted in everybody else's reaction. So like she understandably didn't want to publish the story about Pia because she's such close friends with her now through their cancer journey together. But then that made Clark and Chrissy go and investigate. But then Lois found her way back to being Lois Lane by the end of the episode after a wonderful conversation with her dad, Sam. So, and then Sam had his own stuff going on as well. So I feel like that's what I mean when I say all the storylines came together. You saw the same thing with Jonathan and Kyle, which leads into Jordan and Sarah. So much happening in this episode, and I don't even know where to start because I loved all of the storylines.
Let's start at the top because one thing that the Superman and Lois is going to do this season is hurt you in the first few minutes of the episode. Was it not soundless? Did it just have an instrumental over top of it as we were watching Lois deal with the repercussions of her chemotherapy?
It did. It did. I'm pretty sure it's this. They've used that score. That's such a sentimental score. A beautiful piece of music, quite a few times now. And we've seen Lois going through some of her battle against cancer. We saw it when she first arrived at Hobbs Bay and got the chemo there, and then in this beautiful montage, it was heartbreaking. What and like you said, like how did they make us feel all of that without a single line of dialogue?
I don't know. It's the what got me besides Bitsy's acting was seeing Lois's office be taken down so they could move the bed in there because she needs to sleep on her own now, like because she's just in so much pain. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, I like this is just the boys packing up her boards and her notes and everything was so organized, and then having to create a different bed. I was like, I'm not. I don't like this. They're really leaning hard into the realism, which is a good thing, but it also means that they're breaking our hearts too.
Very much so. And I think that's the beauty of this show. Of course, the Bruno Mannheim storyline is at the center of it, but it never forgets to stop and take a moment to show you things like that. So whether it's in a full episode of what Lois is going through, which we did see earlier in the season, or just a 5 minute montage to catch us up on the time we've missed and show how, of course, we knew how severe this journey would be, but we get to see the great Lois Lane struggle with all of this and her family struggle with all of this. Very, very poignant. And like you said, they came to hurt us, but it was a very, very effective watch.
And it set the scene for her kind of losing herself this episode. And she would. I mean, she's stressed out, and she's not allowed to be as stressed as she needs to be, but she is stressed. And then you have, no, she doesn't really want to talk about this story or her friend who could be dying. Like, and she doesn't. I thought the piece with the society, it looked like a society piece, so I kind of got her point when like Chrissy was like, but it's a good piece of writing. I was like, Chrissy, it's giving a little bit of society pages, just a tad.
Yeah.
So I get what Lois is talking about, but it is something that if she wasn't sick, as she would be like chomping at the bit to be like, yes, expose his wife, because if we do this, then things have to start coming out of the woodwork. We're going to start hearing noise from that part of town. So that aspect of the story I got, but Lois being like, no, leave me, give me my tea and leave my sight.
It was very well done because, like, yeah, it might have looked a wee bit gossipy with that beautiful photo of Pia on what some red carpet. It might have looked a little bit gossipy, but at the end of the day, Lois Lane wants to get to the truth, and if unveiling that truth would ultimately help them crack down on the facade that Bruno Mannheim has created, Lois Lane would absolutely do it, and she would never publish something that she wasn't sure about. But this was what this episode was all about. Lois was no longer sure, and she did feel like she was losing herself. Because when she had that conversation with Chrissy at the start, I was like, Okay, I see where you're coming from totally. But then when she had that moment of realization that Lois Lane wouldn't do this, I'm not acting like Lois Lane. I don't feel like myself. I was like, oh, okay, I see where you're coming from as well. So it was a very, very nuanced portrayal of that because Lois is going through so much, and of course, no TV show has the full scope to show us all of it. But even in that short montage, and then of course, her sitting by the fire and her feeling cold all the time, but also her feeling sweaty from time to time as well. She's just not herself. And in the short amount of time that she was on screen in this episode, you really got to see that. And again, Superman and Lois just it knows how to get pull on the heartstrings and tell authentic stories in a very short amount of time. And I did understand her pivot back in the end, and it was the right decision maybe to publish an article that would get to the truth because, as we saw by the end of that episode, the truth needs to be out there.
Well, I think what's interesting about like Lois in this episode paired with Clark and Chrissy as reporters is that so the thing that sparks Lois is the presentation of hard evidence. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like it's she's not just being presented this glossy page. She's being presented with facts and things that she can research, and that's what ignites her fire again. And you can also kind of see the difference between her and Chrissy as reporters, and difference between Clark and Chrissy as reporters, because it seems like Clark and Lois are a bit more subtle than Chrissy, and like that, I loved seeing Clark the reporter again. But I also love seeing Clark the reporter who was looking up at Chrissy like, "Have you never done this before? What are we doing?" And because she was like laying it on thick with Pia's friend. And I was like, girl, pull it back. This is not how you get secrets.
Right, right. No, I totally agree. And it's interesting because I feel like Lois, no one's going to be better than the great Lois Lane. And then Chrissy are at two different ends of the spectrum. They're two different types of reporters. Clark kind of walks that line between them and is there a healthy balance of both. But even he was caught off guard by Chrissy's direct nature because you have to be careful who you're direct with. Clark had no problem being direct with Bruno Mannheim last week, even with Bless's awkward little pretend tendencies that Clark Kent would do. He had no problem getting to the truth. Whereas Chrissy maybe didn't know her audience that well. And I know everyone's under pressure to get to the truth. And Chrissy was trying to prove that her story was worth it and that Lois needed to publish that. So I do understand the tensions were high and all of that. But yeah, it's nice to see like the veteran Superman, the veteran Clark Kent was like, excuse me, why are we doing this? And it was very, very effective. And I did say last week that I miss seeing Chrissy and Lois's relationship. I miss seeing Chrissy and Lois work together. And I thought this was a great way to bring that back because even though they didn't spend that much time together, by the end of the episode, you had Clark and Chrissy and Lois as this unit, and they'd stumbled upon some serious truth that had been sitting in front of them before. So even though, like I said, Lois and Chrissy are on different ends of the reporter spectrum and Clark's right there in the middle, they couldn't have reached that point without all three of them getting there and doing that investigation. So it was just wonderful to see when we find out that Chrissy found out about Clark's secret and that the three of them were going to be working out of the Smallville Gazette. We wanted to see more of them work together as reporters. And I think that's what we got in this episode because they did get to the truth in the end at what a truth it was.
And they still got to have a little bit of fun too, because
Mm-hmm.
Chrissy's excitement over getting to fly was absolutely adorable.
Love that because we I remember when Lois told her last season, we were all like, Chrissy's gonna be such a super fan. Was it the right decision to tell her? And then we knew Sarah found out about Clark's secret at the end of last season, and nobody really talked about that. We've just obviously moved into this storyline very quickly. It's nice to sit in a bit of that aftermath and see Chrissy get to like fan out about the fact that she gets to work with a superhero. Love that. Like I said, the show makes time for its human storylines, and that's such a human reaction to have.
It was delightful for like, especially coming off of a lot of the heaviness earlier on in
Mm-hmm.
the episode, to have that. She's like, are we gonna fly? And he just does it. He just goes and does like Clark's the best. I know we talk about it all the time, but I really, really, really appreciate Tyler Hoechlin's version of
Mm-hmm.
Clark Kent and Superman. There is just such a lightness to him. And he's like he can do both. He can do awkward all shucks and delightfulness, but and he can also be super serious. I love that he's able to handle both sides of Clark's personality because there's just something about him as Superman that I'm just like, no one else, who else is doing it like this in this day and age as Superman? I don't, no one.
Without a doubt, I agree totally. I feel like we saw a more comic accurate, nerdy kind of portrayal in Supergirl. He had that down to a T, and now this is the more modern kind of like layered version of Clark Kent that some of the movies have tried to give us, but then ended up moving too far into the broody direction. He gets the balance between comic accurate and modern realism down to a Tay, like even last week when he was investigating Bruno, and like, but like he had time to add all the little like awkward body movements in. Tyler's performance as Clark is so effortless, and perhaps even more impressive than his performance as Superman, which is 100% perfect. But you can just see every little character trait, every little nuance, every little golly J, and every little like weight of the world on his shoulders kind of emotion, all encapsulated into one single performance. It's just as wonderful to see. And I love the thing that I love about Superman and Lois the most is you get to see him interact with various different characters. So you see various different sides to that persona as well. And it's not really a persona anymore. He is Clark Kent. He lives Clark Kent. And it's great to say Superman and Lois thrives when it just focuses on the people, and that's who Clark is as a person. It's just wonderful.
It is the okay. I have one qualm, not about Tyler Hoechlin's performance, but there's a line when is Lana telling him or is she telling Chrissy to or tell Lois, I'm thinking of her.
Yeah, that's right. I think it was him.
Okay, because I'm like, if there's one thing about this season that I want more of, it's more people outside of Lois's family coming to see Lois. And I'm like, Lana, you go tell Lois that you're thinking of her.
100%. It's the same thing as what I said about we didn't see Chrissy and Lois together for so long. We finally found our way back there. But like Lois has become such a part of this community, which was a big part of season one. She was like from the big city trying to fit in Smallville. And some of the times people like Kyle didn't understand her approach and didn't think it worked. Whereas now Lois is like almost as much the heart of Smallville as Clark is. So it would make sense that you'd get to see more people come and see her. We've seen it. We've seen quite a bit with John Henry. He pops back every now and again, but I would like to see more of Lana specifically because in the premiere we got to see more of that beautiful Lois Lana friendship that we haven't seen much of that lately. I would love to see much more of that. Lana's kind of been reacting to a lot of people this season without kind of having her own story. We finally saw the beginnings of it in this episode, and we'll definitely get into that. But I feel like Lois would be a great person to talk to about that. And of course, Lois could then open up to Lana about things maybe doesn't feel that she can talk to her family about. That is such an incredible female friendship. And I will say one of my biggest gripes with the season so far is that we haven't seen it expressed a little bit more because it was so rich in the premiere. And I just like to see them share some more scenes together.
I wonder if we'll circle back though. When it has to, they kind of dropped the plot about what happened to the previous mayor. So
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if we're going to circle back in the latter part of the season, and that's how Lois and Lana will start having interactions. Because Lana's very busy as mayor. We don't really know what she's being busy over, other than, of course, she would be in this political office.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. They dropped that storyline. And presumably it's going to tie to Bruno's, perhaps, or something to do with Lex. I'm not sure. But currently, Lana is riding the wave of being busy and giving advice to people. The scene with, I'm going to jump to her scene with Sam, which, just to say, for those who were like, Superman and Lois can be sometimes like a soap opera, which it can't be, because let me tell you, if it was a soap opera, Sam and Lana would have had a thing in that
Mm-hmm.
diner. And I was so scared because I watched a lot of soap operas. I was like, are we going there? We don't need to. We can just let it be a nice little talk, which they did let it be a nice little talk. So I'm happy about that one.
Mm-hmm. That was a lovely scene. I know I had to rewatch it because the first time you watch it, you're like, this isn't happening, is it? This isn't happening, is it? And then when you take that out, you know it's not happening. You're like, oh, that was a wonderful scene. And I think that's the thing that showed us so well. We saw two or 3 weeks ago with the Jonathan and Sarah friendship. A lot of people online were wondering, wait, are these two going to get together? And they're not. It's just wonderful to see two people who don't interact that much get to spend time with each other. And Sam doesn't really live in Smallville; he's just there all the time. But when two people are in, or when so many people are in the same little bubble, two of them are eventually going to cross paths that haven't really interacted that much before. And that Sam and Lana scene was just, you just sense such humanity from that scene. Two people going through similar situations, just finding each other and having a good talk. If they don't interact for the rest of the season, I'm okay with that. If they form one of the best friendships of the show, I'm also okay with that because I know a lot of people online were like, we thought Lana was going to end up with John Henry Irons, and it turns out she could end up with Sam Lane instead. And I was like, a soap might have done that, but Superman and Lois won't do that. I just thought that was lovely. This show takes the time to play with its characters. It thinks, oh, what would that person think if they cross paths with that person? And every time it does that, the results are golden. And this was just an example of that.
Yeah, and Sam got to, I feel like what's great about Sam and Superman and Lois is that he is allowed, like you said, to have a lot of humanity. He's not
Mhm.
just someone who's not blustering, but like he's very determined, and has a very specific opinion about how things should be done, but they don't let that be the end all and be all of him. I've really been enjoying this plot of him trying to discover himself outside of work, because he did not try to find love again after losing his wife walking out on him. So now we're, what did he say, 30 years down the road, and
Mhm.
he feels a little awkward about it, but he's being honest about feeling awkward about it. And I like that scene with him and Lana, because he's like, look, we know you're busy. A lot of people are busy. Don't let that get in the way of your ability to have a life. Because she was sad about not having anyone to go to the concert with her. And he was like, find someone to go.
Yeah. And it was such a great, like, I said it already. It feels like they're going through the same kind of thing, even though the situations are quite different. And so it made total sense that those two characters would find something in each other, some kind of like knowledge that they weren't thinking about because they kind of needed that. And you're right when you say Sam's been kind of trying to find himself outside of work. And I think that's a great story because I kind of worried what they were going to do with the character after season two. Because in season one, he said he was retiring. And then in season two, Lieutenant Anderson took over, and we all know how that ended. So they haven't really addressed the fact, wait, this man just went back to work. Nobody cares about the fact this man who retired is suddenly back running the DOD. Um, Whereas we're not seeing that much of the DOD set now because we're getting to see Sam outside it. And that's great to see too. I don't know whether they'll ever address the fact that he just randomly went back to work and all his big plans to move on with life and start fishing, they've just been dropped. But I mean, like, if it can lead to something more meaningful, I think that's a great idea. It's because Sam's featured like in maybe one scene over the last two or three episodes, but the last time we actually seen him in a meaty role, it was when Jordan created him a profile on Senior Swipe. So it was nice to see that follow through on. A lot of TV shows would have just done that and then never went back to it for the sake of the episode. This is following through on its storylines, and I like to see that. And I think Sam's someone who could do with a story outside of the super stuff, and he hasn't been as involved in the Lois story as I would have liked. Hopefully that'll change going forward. But if we get to see another side of Sam Lane, like we have seen with his lovely relationship with Natalie now, which is great. But we're exploring Sam in different ways this season, and that's wonderful to say.
I hope we get to see his date with the feathered
Yeah,
hair. Like, what did they say? Did they say Farrah Fawcett? Did they name drop Farrah
I'm pretty
Fawcett?
sure someone did. Yes. I was like, oh, I see the vision when they said that.
Yes, I hope we get to meet her at least once. Like, I want to see him out on a date, or if we even if we don't get to see the date, one of him and her leaving the date, and then the family getting to like razz him a bit about it. Like, that'd be so cute.
Oh, that would be. And that's the family stuff that this show does best. You, a lot of shows don't have time for things like that. So whether we see the date or not, I think we should see some kind of fallout from it. It's so important just to him, but it's also just so important to the family dynamic. Like Lois was so happy for him when she found out that he was trying to make it work. And bless him, he's taken on the like deadliest threats in the universe, and he was so super nervous at just a death. And I just thought that is such a human reaction to have. This show doesn't. This show doesn't like overcomplicate things. It doesn't get too ambitious for its own good. It remembers that whether Clark's taken on Doomsday or Azod, he still has time for his family moments, and they're the things that really make him like terrified. And you could say the same about Sam Lane. He's helped Smallville stop Ali Alston at Morgan Edge. Now they're fighting against whatever this is going on with Bruno Mannheim. And he's still super, super nervous over just a debt on his time off because he knows how to fight the end of the world. He doesn't know how to do that. And again, I keep saying human. That's such a human thing to do.
It's so sweet. They just Superman always lives in the sweet spot of sweetness. Like
Yeah.
they just have a great ability to be able to like warm your heart. I was also warmed by, surprisingly, Jordan and Sarah this
Mm-hmm.
episode. I They finally got a chance to hang out just themselves, and there was nothing angsty or heartbreaking about it. We just got to listen to The Cure, which, by the way, writers, are you trying to tell me Sarah doesn't listen to The Cure? Uh, why was she surprised that I get being surprised about her mom listening, because she has a very interesting picture of who her mom is. It just does not align up with who Lana actually is. But the idea that Miss Rebel Girl has never heard of The Cure is just throws me. It took me all the way out of the scene. I had to open the door and walk back in.
This is like Alanis Morissette all over again. You're telling me that Sarah, I feel like Sarah would, she has such a knowledge of music. She has such a knowledge of like she just feels like those teen characters from the 2000s. Reed said it really well once, that she just she's such a great character when the show wants to explore that. It doesn't enough. But I feel like she would have an idea of who Alanis Morissette and The Cure was. And even if she didn't listen to their music religiously, I don't think she would need to be told who they were, if you get the point. I feel like, and I also feel like the Lang Christine household would still have had a CD player hanging around at one point. Like, no need to make us feel like fossils now. Like, houses still have CD players. Um, but yeah, like what I described a few minutes ago about Lana and Sam finding each other, because they were the people who had that kind of missing puzzle piece, that knowledge that the other one needed to hear. I never thought that I would say that Jordan and Sarah were that for each other, but that's exactly what they became in this episode. I've missed seeing them share screen time together, and watching this scene made me realize how much I actually did kind of ship them in season one. This isn't about shipping. If they don't get back together, that's fine. I love their bestie chemistry, but I did ship them together in season one because they handled the storyline very, very well. Some of what's happened after that has not been up to scratch because they just keep going back and forth between arguing secrets, lies, can't trust this, whatever. You forgot how much chemistry the actors have when they're just sitting there having a lovely conversation. In the Lang household, which I don't think gets used enough, I love their living room set so much. And it always like paves the way for some great conversations. And just, I wish Sarah and Jordan would listen to each other, or listen to themselves even more, because by goodness, do they give great advice? They just don't follow it enough.
I wasn't prepared for that advice giving. Like Sarah
Right.
giving advice to Jordan. I was like, girl, take your own. But but like usually it stops there, right? She gives good advice and then we move on. But Jordan turned around. He's like, actually, let me give you a little nugget for you too. Your mom wanted you to go to the concert to have a bonding experience. You missed that entire point, but that was what she was asking. She's like, are you guilting me? And he's like, yeah, bye.
And it was so effective. Part of me wanted to see the scene where Sarah told Lana she'd be there for her and go with her. But then seeing the little montage of the two of them dancing to The Cure in the living room, I was like, oh, okay, this did what it needed to do. The storyline wasn't about whether Sarah was going to the concert or not, or whether she knew about who The Cure was or not. It was about the fact of whether she was willing to be there for her mom and bond with her mom in a way that her mom needed. Because I think one of the three of us said last week, I can't remember who it was, said that Sarah is at the stage where she's starting to learn that her mom isn't just her mom. She's a person who had feelings similar to her back in the day and probably still has feelings similar to that now. She's seeing that there's more layers to Lana than she knew outside of parent. And I think this was a more simple and subtle one, but another layer of exploration of that, because they didn't spend an awful lot of time together, but the more time Sarah spent away from her, the more she learned about her. Yeah, maybe she needed Jordan to help her see that, but she did learn quite a bit about her. Just like last week, she learned about the fireworks, and she wanted to make sure that she didn't feel left out when she saw her with Chrissy in town. Um, I don't know where we're going with the Sarah and Lana friend or relationship, because it's been quite up and down in only a short space of 8 episodes. But I do think if you can sum up their journey this season, it's about Sarah learning that there's more to Lana than just being her mom. And I think this episode was another good example of that.
And it's so fascinating to watch because that was me. I really enjoy family dramas and teen shows
Mhm.
when the teen, their eyes start opening to like the different parts of their parents. And I feel like for Sarah, that is so necessary right now because she's written her mom off. Like, which is, I'm not sure if we were in that place in previous seasons, but we are now. And so for her to like be realizing this picture of my mom isn't who she is great because she needs it. I think it'll also help Sarah see her own self, if that makes sense. I like what they're doing with the writing because Sarah has to pause. She has like a rude reaction. And then she's like, I probably shouldn't have said that like that. But she'll never go back. Her friend always has to tell her first. But then
Yeah.
she will fix it, which I really appreciate that about the storytelling. But one of the things I wish they didn't do was the slap, because I feel like you could have this story without Lana having slapped Sarah. It was unnecessary. It was for it right now. It feels like it was for shock value since we didn't explore Lana's mom. But
Hmm.
hopefully we will later, and they'll circle back to where that came from.
Yeah, I hope so, because they brought Lana's mom up twice, like back to back in 2 episodes, and it was like, is this moment coming into it? But if this is a season of learning, and Lana's learning more and Sarah's learning more, that would be wonderful, because I will say I do want more for both of them. The last two episodes have been great in that department, that it's given me a taste of what I've been missing from them too. In that I used to love the Cushing family scenes because I feel like they added so much more depth to it, especially in a particularly super serious episode. And we don't get to see them that much, obviously, because the three of them aren't together anymore. But like Sarah and Lana have some wonderful scenes, and we don't see enough of them. And I know where you're coming from. I'm not sure what the slap accomplished yet. I hope by the time you reach the end of the season, we can look back and say, yes, okay, I see where that went. Because I've said this many, many times, it just does feel like Lana's reacting to an awful lot of what's happening around her. And we're only getting little snippets of her actually getting a moment in a Lana story, not Lana reacting to someone else's storyline. We're finally going into places with Lana's story. And I wonder if that, like you said, that'll play into Onomatopoeia and the mayor and Bruno Mannheim, because he did say Smallville was on his radar to Natalie. So I wonder if Smallville is on Bruno Mannheim's radar, you can damn sure bet that Lana's going to come into his crosshairs at some point with her being the mayor of the town. But I we're starting to see the beginnings of the more I wanted for her this season, and I hope it keeps moving in that direction.
I know, meaty plots for Lana, please. Like we
Definitely.
really need more at this point. Fingers crossed. But speaking of things that I've been enjoying, for me, I also liked the Jordan Jonathan blow up. I thought this was a better handling of the tension between the two of them than Jordan just being snarky about his brother being a junior firefighter. Did he say something rude in his fight with John? Yes, he did. But John came in with such fire that I just did not expect Jordan not to let one slip. Like he just threw one over the side because it just was a natural reaction. I mean, I think it does speak to how Jordan sees Jonathan's volunteering, but also that had to have come from someplace, which means Jonathan, you're complaining in the room too much about what you don't get to do. So I did enjoy it though because it allows you to see how important this is for John and that little space for him where he's like, I want to be a hero too. Everybody's a freaking hero in this family, and I've got to like earn my stripes in a way that's slower than everybody else. I hate that. Like I enjoy. Well, he hates that. I'm enjoying this immensely, but I know I just think it's a really good plot beat for both of them.
I totally agree. The last three episodes have been quite Jonathan heavy, and I am here for it. This poor fella has not had much screen time, or as much as he should have, over the whole two seasons. And he spent an awful long time being lost without the story actually addressing the fact that he's lost. We saw a lot of it at the start after he moved to Smallville, but we haven't done that much since. And this season feels like a season of redemption for him, because not only is he still trying to move on from the XK scandal last season, he's trying to see where he fits in the world, and he's starting to feel at home in Smallville. And he's still not sure whether he's always going to have to live in his brother's shadow in his head as far as being a hero and doing good things is, but this is his outlet for that, getting to work with Kyle and at the fire station, and then getting to even be on the scene as they put out a fire. It made him feel like he was doing something and give him a purpose, and that's what he's definitely felt, what he personally, I certainly haven't, what he personally felt like he was lacking over the last two seasons. So I just love to see it. Michael Bishop's doing a great job with the material. John has some very nuanced storylines in that they're playing the long game with them. We're not getting one episode and done where he has to go from 0 to 100 right away. Although the scene between Jordan and Jonathan went from 0 to 100 very, very quickly. But like, I understood both sides of that argument. Jordan was definitely out of line with how far he went with that comment. It escalated very quickly. But of course, we know Jonathan was the one who was responsible for escalating it in the first place, for storming into that house and disrupting that nice moment. But that's it. I'm not picking a side because I love it. This is genuine, authentic family drama. You can understand where the two of them are coming from. And Jordan's still, he's definitely a hero, but he's still a long way to go of to being the hero. I don't know, we've used the term Superboy an awful lot. I don't know whether that's going to be his code name. But now it's interesting that this has resulted in the fact that Kyle's suspicious. Are they going to have to bring Kyle into the bubble? And does that mean Kyle's going to have to lie to his colleagues who also saw the ice? So many layers to such a simple storyline. It didn't have that many scenes.
What's funny about the ice though is like Jordan should know better. Why are we putting the fire out with ice? Or at least if we're gonna do that, why didn't we melt the ice when we were done?
Right,
It
right.
just seems like it's such a rookie mistake, but he is a rookie.
Hmm.
I don't know why. I wonder if they're going to give us a reason for why he just didn't have time to, cover his tracks. I, I did like that he said he was trying to help, and I was trying to figure out whether or not he meant he was also trying to help his brother. And since like I saved someone, but I put them in front of you.
Hmm.
So like now you can be a hero too. I don't know if that was the impetus for what he was doing, or if it just so happened he saw his brother and I'm just gonna put this person here. But I also thought that they did a good job of having Jonathan have misplaced anger, because his real anger should be with Kyle for jumping to conclusions rather than his brother saving someone and leaving the body there. Because there was no way Jonathan pulled that body out of the building. But Kyle was like, "We told you to stay put," and I was like, "Kyle, look at the uniform. Do you see smoke? Like, is it and there's there ash anywhere? No."
And like, do you think that kind, sweet boy destroyed that door by walking through it? Come on now, use your head, sir.
No.
I feel like, oh, Kyle is such a good character because he can rile you up really, really easily, and like you may feel for him at times, but like when he starts getting on his high horse and getting very, very like arrogantly angry, you're like, sit down, leave Jonathan alone. And after what he did to him with the little Kent debacle on the t-shirt in the previous episode, I'm like, you should know better by now than to treat this guy bad, because like at the end of the day, well, yeah, maybe he didn't disobey orders in the end. That's the important thing here. But to you, maybe he shouldn't have disobeyed orders, but was getting your colleague out of the fire not the most important priority here, making sure he was okay. I get that Kyle worries and he flies off the handle, but yeah, it was effective in what it was doing. But I just have a hard time with Kyle as a character. Jonathan's my new favorite character. I can't help but feel for him and root for him every time. So you come for Jonathan and you come for me. So I took that attack very, very personally.
It can't be helped. He's so
Right.
sweet faced and he's so good and he's just trying to do his best and to really find purpose, which I think this firefighting plot is helping him do that. I do wonder if Kyle's going to jump to the wrong conclusion and assume that Jonathan is Superboy.
That could be an interesting one, especially since he was found with the evidence. I do think this is going very interesting because Kyle is obviously at the center of a few storylines now. The show is never directly addressed whether he'd be involved in the super stuff, apart from most of that scene in the town hall where Clark showed up dressed as Superman, even though he lost his powers last season. Kyle has never interacted with Superman. He has they've kept the Cushing side of things very real, very grounded. So if Kyle gets involved in this, I wonder what his reaction would be. Would he not like the fact that Sarah knows? I also just wanted to, I would like to see more of Sarah knowing that she found out quickly, rushed at the end of last season. Now Jordan's kind of showing her all his powers. I wish would have liked to have seen a bit more of conversation there because I love it when the real world is that's not possible merges with the super world. Isn't like, oh yeah, Superman exists. I wanted to see a bit more of that, and I know Superman at Lois doesn't really have the time to do it because now we know Pia is a metahuman, and this isn't set in the same world as the Arrowverse. Where are these metahumans coming from? Superman's supposed to be one of the only people with powers unless he's an alien. So I would like to see a little bit more of that, and maybe we'll learn more as it goes on. But I am excited to see how Kyle deals with the whole like super side of the story.
I want to see everybody else has reacted okay, except for Lana. And that
Mm-hmm.
is because it was more so that was her best friend slash ex-boyfriend, and she expected to have been told at some point, and she just was not. So there was like decades worth of hurt there. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as Kyle, he is so this town can take care of itself. So it'd be interesting if he is like, we don't need Superman,
Mm-hmm.
even though he enjoys Clark. So perhaps that won't be the case. I don't know because Tao gives me whiplash. He's either like the best dude or he's the most irritating dude. Like there's like no in between for him. They pick a side and then they just let him roll in the
Yeah,
show.
he likes to be wrong a lot. I'm sorry, he really does. But yeah, I feel like he's one character. He's kind of been off screen a little bit. It's really interesting to me how they're using their characters this season because like Sam Lane will appear in like one scene and then disappear for two episodes. Same thing happens to Kyle now. Kyle wasn't in last week's episode and he had all of two scenes in this episode. He'll obviously be very pivotal going on, but that's kind of like that's like small town kind of realism there. You're not going to see everybody every day of the week, so it makes sense. But I hope he doesn't leave Jordan in limbo for too or Jonathan in limbo for too long because he that was his purpose. He loved doing that job, and I hope he gets to do it again soon. Everybody everybody's a hero in Smallville in their own way, and I think the fact now that Kyle might have to contend with the fact that there are real superpowered superheroes flying around doing helping him do his job off screen, even though he doesn't realize that. I think that's going to make for a very interesting conversation. And I hope the show does explore that in depth.
It could be a really, really great meaty scene for the actor,
Mm-hmm.
in which I don't know where they would have it take place, but in any case, it'd be really good. Speaking of goodness, though, to move to the Bruno Mannheim part with Pia, the cuteness that was that dinner between them, Natalie, and Mateo, which then spiraled into a mobster scene, was like they're so good at balance. And like it's just they remind you he's a family man. And they were like, but he will also wrap his hand in the napkin to cover his jewels before he beats somebody's face in.
It was jarring, wasn't it? It was whiplash. It was everything all at once. What a scene that was. We went from EastEnders to The Godfather in 5 minutes. It just wow, so much happening. But like seeing Pia and Bruno. Bruno acted so lovably father like. It was wonderful, and you don't get to see that side of villains in shows like that. Like it was wonderful, and I really do have grown it. Well, not when she went all Black Canary, but I did very grow attached to Pia in that scene. Just getting to see her be a mom and getting to see them like embarrass Mateo and Natalie, just loving the dynamic. She fitted in so well with them. Um, and like yeah, Bruno was the one that caught me off guard when he was telling the stories and putting on the funny voices and everything. I was like, oh, this man is so cuddly. Like, why is he killing people off when we don't see this? Um, and then yeah, it really did. It took an extreme turn because he didn't even care for the fact that Natalie he had no intention of harming her and Natalie's head. But he did not care that John Henry was just there to collect his daughter. He did not care that it was accidental confusion that led them to this moment. And he did not care that the kids were there behind him, seeing him behave like the mobster that he was. He was like, if I see John Henry again, that man is dead, irrespective of the circumstances. So the facade dropped and it got violent and it got uncomfortable very, very, very quickly. And Bruno had no time to think about it. It was Pia's reaction was interesting to me because she was trying to hold Bruno back, and you don't need to do this. But 5 minutes later, she was like, yeah, I'm going to scream this man to death. So it was interesting seeing all the different layers. These people are villains through and through, but there is good in them. But when their secrets are in danger, when their livelihoods are in danger, when their upstanding citizenship in the world is in danger, they will do whatever it takes to keep that intact. And if that meant taking John Henry Irons out of the equation, they were willing to do that. And it did get dark there.
It did, and it was delicious.
It was.
I I love villains that love their spouses and their kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a dichotomy, and it confuses people. And I'm like, don't be confused. People can be lovely to the ones they love and absolute trash to everybody else. Like that's the other side of humanity that we don't sometimes focus on. And this show is like, oh no, we're gonna give you wholesome at this dinner
Mm-hmm.
table, and then we're gonna give you the action you've been waiting for. And I think the one point that Bruno cares is just to remove the kids from the room.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna stop, but they don't have to see it. That's basically what his mindset is. And you could definitely see the flip the of the switch. He was like, "Oh, I'm no longer a lovable father. I am now the kingpin, and I told you not to come around these parts. So you're going to heed this word." I also the way that they did the action was wonderful. Like, yes, we saw John be beat down, but then he called the suit, and I was ready to see yet another scene of that suit come onto his body like Iron Man. And we did some slow-mo walking, which was great.
It was amazing. That scene took me out because, like, I was like, "Wait, what's going on here?" The suit couldn't connect because of the power of the canary cry. It was holding it back, and then she forced him back. Wasn't that right? And then the next time we saw him, he was just slow mo marching in, and it was such a moment. At first, you were like, "Oh, hold on a minute, this can't. He's going to die. The suit can't go on him." But then it was like, "Well, your canary cry can't stop him." So they both. That was such a moment for both Pia and John because you got to see the fact that both of them were forces to be reckoned with. Of course, her screen run won out in the end because it was damaging the technology of the suit. But like, you honestly did not know what way that scene was going to go. And then it would cut back to Clark, Chrissy, at Lois. We're like, we got him. And it was such a quiet, peaceful, almost triumphant moment. You're like screaming at the TV, somebody hear John, somebody help John. And then Clark did in the end. But like I said earlier, they upped the tension beautifully, and that's in that whole episode. But it just peaked beautifully at that moment.
And then to see Clark come down as Superman and him also not being able to really, all he could do was shield John. He still
Mm-hmm.
couldn't move through her blast. That is a very, very strong scream. The only reason John is alive is because she has cancer and she's sick and she can't control her vocal cords, it looks like. Because at the dinner table, when she coughed, that she shook the building, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when she was screaming for that long, which it was a prolonged scream, she has lung control for sure. That it just when she lost it and you could see it like her throat and the way that you could tell that she was about to just collapse. I was like, this is interesting. I love when we get to see how sickness affects superpowers and
Mm-hmm.
people's ability to continue to push forward. She has a strong capacity though. I'm like, I don't know if y'all want to see her healthy in a fight because it seems like you will lose and lose terribly.
Definitely. I feel like I always said Arrow really didn't really like delve into the Black Canary's power enough as it should have, because the screen was hit and miss. They would always do, oh, look, it deafened people at one point, but at the other time, it just blew them back against the wall and they can get back up, no hearing problems whatsoever. But the fact that the screen managed to deafen Clark and you could hear the ringing in his ear afterwards, so effective. And then, like you said, seeing Pia's throat almost buckle as she was doing it, and Bruno almost had that like he knew what was about to happen, but it was too far gone at that stage. He couldn't stop it. And then the pivot back that he had to ask Superman for help in the end, because Superman was the only one that could get her to a hospital on time. Even I don't know whether Bruno knew that that hospital would be in the DOD and that he probably wouldn't see his wife again, but like he was willing to do whatever it took to make sure she was safe in that moment in time. Wow, like what the dynamics, the power struggle, the characters there, like you said, the dichotomy works so well, because no way would that man, no way would Mr. Get Out of My Office give Superman an advantage here, but he needed him to get out of there so that he could protect his wife. And that's far more interesting of a villain to me than someone who just utters sassy one liners. Incredible, incredible, because this felt like almost the midpoint of the show, and yet we're 3 quarters into the season. I don't know how we're going to come back from that. What looks next? The promo for next week looks, or the next episode looks even more intense. The show has some fans have been criticizing the pace of the show and then it's been too slow moving it with not enough super stuff happening. No, this is how you effectively do that, because I feel like every super stuff that counts going forward is going to count, because they've upped the tension beautifully right up until now. I think every episode going forward is going to feel like you've got the stakes of a finale because they made us wait for it. And if a show can do that, this is how you use a 13 episode season very, 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 very well, because the pacing has just been incredible, and I can't wait to see where it goes next, because I think while we've been worried about Lois, while we've been worried about the characters and their journeys, I feel like the next couple of episodes are going to be high stakes, high intensity finale like feel as we head towards the actual finale, and that's the payoff the show's used to giving us, and it's the payoff that it deserves, because I can't wait to see where it goes.
And we know this because of the ending of the episode. The way
Mm-hmm.
that they found out that clearly Pia used her powers to pretend to be Lex Luthor and make a confession. And that is how his behind landed in jail. Like
Mm-hmm.
the slow discovery of that, the reveal that happens in one episode, I'm like masterful. And it makes sense because they told us about Pia and they told us about Bruno. They made sure the story was stacked up right before they dropped that bomb. And now we've got to wait until May 23rd to find out what's going to happen next, paired with Bizarro being awake.
It's all happening in Smallville, isn't it? I feel like that was such a beautiful introduction of Lex Luthor, because we mentioned him once in season one, I think, when we still weren't sure if the show was an Arrowverse show or not. So is this going to be John Cryer's Lex? What are we talking about? But like, we haven't mentioned Lex as a regular presence over all this time, and it's because he's been in prison for close to 2 decades. And we thought when he got out, the grudge he'd have would be with Superman, but it sounds like we could be having a bit of a mob war going on when he gets out, because I feel like he's going to be coming for Bruno. And that's something that Superman and the cats and all are going to find themselves stuck in the middle of. And dare I say that might even be worse than having one of those villains come for you, because now you're going to have the two of them trying to tear each other apart. Yeah, lots going to happen. I can't wait for Michael Cudlitz to show up as Lex Luthor. We're going to have a bit of a Walking Dead with reunion as he reunites with Chad L. Coleman from The Walking Dead. Can't wait to see them two go head to head with each other and see who comes out the victor. Is this going to set the stage for a more long term Lex presence in Superman and Lois going forward? Who knows? But yeah, what a reveal! Pia is more powerful than she let on, and she was single handedly responsible for Lex spending the vast majority of his life thus far in prison. Who knows where we're going? But like so much heading into the final few episodes of the season, and oh, it feels better than ever.